All right, hello everyone. My name is Kevin, and I'd like to welcome you all to our latest Novedge webinar series episode. Today we are partnering up with none other than Marc Teer of Black Spectacles. Today you will learn how to take a view of your Revit model and transform it into a beautiful drawing using a variety of techniques and tools like object styles, line weights, filled regions, and detailed components. When you are done, you will understand how to set up your model and use these drawing tools to generate beautiful drawings out of Autodesk Revit Architecture 2014. Now, for those who aren't aware, Marc Teer is an architect, educator, and the founder of Black Spectacles, the world's first website for learning architecture and design software. Novedge first met Marc through the power of social media, and when we blogged about the services that he offered, and after a few exchanges, the date was set. To keep it simple, we are very happy to partner up with Marc and to offer this free webinar for everybody. Today's presentation is about 40 minutes long, and afterwards we'll have a brief Q&A session where Marc will answer your questions live. So during the presentation, feel free to submit your questions to us at any time in the chat window below. But before we get going with the presentation, here's an overview of what we do at Novedge. The Novedge webinar series is brought to you by Novedge.com. As one of the largest online design software stores, we offer a huge assortment of software solutions that cater to virtually every designer's need. If you are interested in purchasing a digital version of Autodesk Revit Architecture, please visit our product page for more information. To learn more, you're more than welcome to call and speak with our Autodesk specialist, Scott Hester. You can reach him by his email address, scott@novedge.com. And because we are working with Marc, I want to encourage you guys, if you guys are looking for training at home, at the office, an easy way to reach for it is to go to blackspectacles.com. Marc, do you want to speak briefly about your website?
Yeah, sure. So we've been partnering with practicing architects from, some of the best firms in the world, like SOM and, Adrian Smith, Gordon Gill, and Gensler, and Crick and Sexton, and so on. Folks that are using software, in the real world, and we've been recording, video tutorials with them, and so we built this really simple website where all these courses are sort of broken down into small little videos. Some are free to watch, and the others, the majority of our content is not free, and we offer it as a part of a membership. So it's $30 a month. And you get access to everything we have, from courses in Revit. We have quite a bit of Revit content, actually, but also Rhino and Grasshopper and 3D Max and Photoshop. It's all sort of focused on architecture. So we have all try to cover the entire gamut of architecture software learning. So that's what Black Spectacles is. We're based here in Chicago. We're really lucky. We have lots of great firms and lots of great expertise here. We also work with folks from other cities as well. But as a new business here, that's now almost 2 years old. We've been now lucky to have a lot of different folks from Chicago at great firms help us out and make great content. So I'm the founder of Black Spectacles, and really excited to be with you guys and share a few tips here on how to make some really beautiful drawings.
Cool. I do want to remind everybody too as well that live attendees will get a free coupon. Well, not free coupon for 10% off if you are a Novedge attendee today's webinar presentation off a membership at blackspectacles.com. So do check it out. Do check that post webinar email as well. All right, and I do want to mention that I think we're going to have a lot of questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to forward it to Marc, and then Marc's going to answer them, and then we'll post it on our blog.novedge.com. That'll be a good way to get your feedback as well that you'll need after the presentation. And I do want to mention that facebook.com/Novedge, if you want to follow the latest updates, the webinar updates, what's going on in the industry, that's a good place to find out as well. And I do want to plug our next upcoming webinar. Vectorworks Landmark 2013 is the perfect choice for landscape and garden design. The software understands the process of site design, including tools for site, terrain modeling, tools for hard landscape design, and of course, extensive tools for planting design. It also produces schedules directly from your design so you don't have to count. Vectorworks author and trainer Tamsin Slatter shows us how next week. So if you are available, the webinar is free and will last about 1 hour, including the Q&A session. To sign up, head on over to novedge.com/webinar/83. And if by any chance you have to leave early today, and if you want to rewatch this webinar, we're going to record it and upload it, and you can find it definitely by tomorrow at vimeo.com/Novedge and also youtube.com/Novedge. And with that said, Mark, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Cool. All right, I'm going to switch over presenter to you right about now. Let's do this. Cool. All right, take it away. Enjoy, guys.
All right. So can you see my screen?
There we go.
Got it?
Yes. I see your browser. Cool.
Okay, good. So yeah, so this was Black Spectacles. Just really briefly, if you go to our blog, as Kevin suggested, for Novedge, you can also keep in touch with us. You can sign up for our newsletter, like our Facebook page, and follow us on Twitter. And then Kevin also suggested that we're pleased to offer these, or give away these free T-shirts. So if you go to hello.blackspectacles.com/free T and just provide a couple of bits of information, we'll send you a free T-shirt. And I think Kevin mentioned he was going to include that in the post webinar email as well. So
Yep.
so yeah, so that's just a couple things. What we're going to do today is so the name of this course is creating beautiful drawings in Revit, and what we're going to work on today is, or what we're going to try to do, I should say, is to basically create a beautiful 2D elevation drawing. We're going to use the Lever House, which is a good sort of mid-century modern kind of classic building in New York, as the basis for for our study or our exercise. And the reason why I think this is a useful topic is because so many times I've worked with sort of elder statesmen designers who've been pound-fisting adamant that you can't make beautiful drawings in Revit, which I know is not true, and that it really just sort of takes the same level of attention that you might give to an AutoCAD drawing or hand drawing or any other media, and so you really just need to know those tools and techniques, and then you can sort of move forward and create some really nice drawings. During this sort of exercise, we'll cover topics such as line weights, object styles, line styles. We'll work on title blocks a little bit, maybe view titles, graphic overrides, as well as shadows. So that's pretty much what we're going to cover. So let me hop into 3D here. And so this is the model we'll be working with, a model of the Lever House. And then just to give you a sense of where we're going, this is sort of a before and after drawing. So this is an elevation here that I've created out of that model. Just kind of zoom in here and look at the corner. You can kind of see what you get. And this is a pretty common kind of view you would get in out of a Revit elevation, for example, right? And this is really where we're trying to go. So here you have something with with some line weight, showing some depth, both with the line weight, but then also with the shadows. So that's kind of where we're going. So I'm going to be working in Revit 2014. Although to be honest with you, there really aren't any tools or techniques that I'm going to show you that are particularly unique to this new version. Everything that I'm going to show you probably goes all the way back to maybe even as early as 2009. They're all pretty simple techniques. And I should also express there's a lot of different ways to move, and maybe I'll show you the sheet that I've got set up, sort of the elevation before. There's certainly different techniques and different ways that you can go from kind of a basic ugly flat elevation like this to the one that we're gonna make. The approach that I'm going to sort of advocate here is really sort of the simplest approach that you could kind of do, or that you could kind of work with. And the reason is because there are a lot of sort of tricked out ways that you could maybe create that elevation. But the truth is that many of us, when you're working in an office with a lot of people, maybe on your team, I mean, despite the fact that it's 2013 today, there's still a lot of firms that are just starting to use Revit, or folks who who might be on your team who don't have a lot of experience. So we find more and more developing techniques that are really simple that anyone can hop in and use really quickly, generally kind of trump kind of the fancy tricked out ways. So I just sort of express that so you sort of know where I'm coming from. All right, so what I'm going to do to get started here, we have this sheet with this view called North Elevation Before, and I'm going to right-click and just duplicate it with detailing. And then I'll rename it to North Elevation After. Okay, so this is sort of what we'll start with. And so to begin, the first thing I'll do is make the levels go away, because I don't want to see those in my elevation. So I'll go to levels and turn them off. And then grids, I'm going to go ahead and leave them on, but I'm going to check this halftone box, which will make them gray and halftone, so that they kind of recede. And then I really don't want these grid lines running through the entire elevation, so I'm going to pull them up so they only sort of exist at this top area here. So I'll switch my grid line from 3D to 2D, and we'll drag them up. It looks like, unfortunately, I'm going to have to do this sort of manually one at a time. So we'll pull all of them up. It's really important that I'm switching them from 3D to 2D. Folks who might be new to using Revit just in general, should know that grid lines, are actually planes that cut through the entire model. So they're not actually lines, they're really planes. So if I was moving the 3D extents, it would mean that I was moving, the bottom of that plane all the way up, and thus sort of affecting the entire model. Looks like maybe I missed this guy here a little bit. And the last one here. All right, so now we have those guys out of the way. And so what we need to do next is to jump in here and take a look and see what we have. And it looks like I've been working in this model a little bit. So what I want to do is I kind of want to undo something that I've done. And I want to show you sort of the problem as it originally existed. So bear with me here for a moment as I just sort of put it back how it was before. And then I'll kind of get into how these guys were originally set up. So for most of you, when you're in a floor plan, which of course was how this was created, so you'll be in a floor plan and you will, go to your view tool and you will, grab the elevation tag and you'll drop an elevation in this, which will, both create this tag, but it will also create an elevation view for you. When you do that, what you'll normally get is kind of a pretty flat looking elevation that has kind of muddy, might have muddy line work like this one does. Generally, it's pretty kind of consistent looking kind of line work. So generally, it needs some work. And so the way to manipulate that work or manipulate these line weights is through the Manage tab here. And if you go to Additional Settings, you'll find the Line Weights tool. And if you come here, if you're following along, you your dialog box might look a little different in terms of how many of these line weights exist, but depending on the template that you have, you'll get a variety of these line weights. And the way this works is that there are line weights from 1 to 16 that you can see here on the left, and then the actual thicknesses associated with those numbers are scale dependent. So, here's a 3" equals a foot scale, here's an 1/8 inch equals a foot, and here's a 1/16 inch equals a foot scale. And so, for example, for a line weight of 3 at 1/16 of an inch, it's 0.0075 inches thick. Now, of course, 16 line weights is a lot of line weights. I've never encountered, a situation where you needed all 16. It generally tends to be more like, somewhere between 4 and 6 line weights, that you might need. So it's important here that you have, that you even have a line weight setting for the scale you're working in. A lot of times, like you might notice, for example, there's no 3/4 inch scale here. So if you had a view that actually was in 3/4 of an inch scale, well, then you might actually have to add, a scale for 3/4 of an inch, and then it would add it, and then you would very likely need to go through and manipulate these line weights. And one thing, and that's sort of a good point to make. Just because you can add a line weight scale settings, if you will, doesn't necessarily mean that these are the right numbers, that these are the right thicknesses for that scale. So what I normally see and what I normally advocate for is the idea that you should really test these line weights for the scale you're working in, which sounds like it could be kind of arduous, but I mean really it's generally most firms and offices are really working somewhere between 6 and 10 maybe different scales or something like that. So arguably you do it sort of once and you're kind of all set. So but it needs to happen, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of folks think that you can't get good line weights out of Revit, is because nobody ever takes the time to set all this up. So for us in this particular case, you can see down here in the bottom, we'll be working at 1/16 inch equals a foot. And you'll see the line weights we have here. I've kind of gone ahead and set them up, starting with 8, going all the way to 1, basically going in 0.0025 increments, all the way to 1, and I've made 1 as thin as it could possibly be, which is 0.001, just because I want that to be as thin as possible. So those are the line weights that we have that are working here. The big question though is, you have these numbers 1 through 16. How are they associated with all of the modeled elements that you're looking at? And the answer is through object styles. So again, if you're under the Manage tab and you go to Object Styles, here you will see under Model Objects all the elements, all the model elements that might exist in your project. And then you'll see that they have a line weight associated with them. And one of them is projection and the other is cut, which basically means elevation and section. So we're looking at an elevation, of course, so we're concerned with the projection line weights. And so for this this elevation, this part that we're looking at here, this section is a group of curtain panels. So for example, I think we can probably agree that they're too heavy, kind of with their default setting here in this particular model. So if you go to curtain panels, you'll see that their projection line weight is set to 4. So let's set it to 1 and see what that does for us. Let's see that that lightens everything up pretty dramatically. So if I zoom in real close, you'll see that now those line weights are set pretty thin, or literally as thin as they could possibly be in Revit. And then if you look around a little further, these guys here, if I select this, you'll see that this is a wall, so it's not a curtain panel, it's a wall. So if we go to Manage Object Styles again, and if we go to Walls, see that it's set to 4. So let's set that as well to 1, and you'll see these lines get a lot thinner as well. So let's look around a little bit. You'll see, okay, so you'll see this is a column, and you'll see that these are curtain wall mullions. So I'm going to go back to object styles again, to column, and set that to 1, and then curtain wall mullions, and set that to 1 as well. And you'll see that those lightened up. You'll see that this sort of swing annotation is really heavy. So let's go to object styles again. And the reason why that's the case is because, well, first of all, doors should be set to 1. But secondly, you can see underneath doors there are a number of sub-objects here. So elevation swing, which I think is what we're looking at there, and so on. So the idea is that you can have multiple, so for all the sub-objects that you might have in a family, you can have multiple line weights. So I'm going to change those to 1 as well to make sure that everything is the same line weight. And you can see that now that works. I think finally, maybe, I think you see there's a sort of a heavier line here, just from sort of testing this out beforehand. I believe that's a ceiling. You can see it's a ceiling. So we can also manipulate the object styles for ceilings. Now you should note that everything that I'm changing here, I'm changing for the entire model. So it's not, this is not view dependent. These are the sort of settings for the entire project. And for me, I mean, I think I'm kind of doing this for demonstration purposes, but you might actually take an approach where you select everything and you make it a line weight of 1 in projection throughout your entire model. This is also something that you'll need to kind of play with and develop your own standards in your own office in order to kind of find the right aesthetic that you might be looking for in your office. So for the purposes of this exercise, I want to start with kind of a base of everything as thin as I can get it. So that's kind of a good start. Now you will probably also see here we have some topography in this model, which is this site, and it brings along with it this earth hatch. And let's say well, let me back up. So for those of you that are comfortable and like to work with and like to use this topography, one of the reasons you might like to do that is because it's really useful when you're cutting sections through building, whether they're building sections or wall sections. It's really nice to know where the earth is, when you're cutting your section and for it to show up. But in this elevation that I'm looking at here, let's say I don't really want to see the earth hatch, but instead, I just want to see a heavy line running through this thing. I could maybe hide this thing, but then maybe there are model elements that exist below the site. So then I would see a bunch of stuff that I don't want to see. And then I could also probably change the material so that I don't see this hatch anymore. But in this case, in all my other views, I do want to see it. So the simplest thing to do here is really just to develop a filled region to essentially place over this so that I get the aesthetic that I want, but I don't kind of ruin, if you will, my model. So I'm going to go to Annotate, and then I'll go to Filled Region. And I'm going to grab this little rectangle tool and create a rectangle around my site. You'll notice that if you look closely, you'll notice I'm kind of trying to make it a little bit larger than the site hatch that currently exists there. Now, these lines that I just drew, they actually have a thickness to them. They'll show up in my model, or I'm sorry, in this view. Right now they're shown as thin lines, so they'll be thin. But I actually don't want to see these 3 lines at all. So I'm going to actually use the sort of default invisible lines, which is a line style that's a default that comes along in the basic template, I think. But then there's this line here, which I want this to show up as a heavy line. And so this is a good opportunity for us to talk about how to develop our own line styles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Manage again. And a lot of these tools that we're talking about today are really under Manage and then additional settings. Maybe if they pulled them out, people would know about them more. But we've already covered line weights. Let's cover line styles. So we'll hop into the line styles box. And you'll see, you get a number of different sort of line styles that come along in your template. What I want to do is I want to create a collection of our own. And I want to start with one. So in order to do that, you go to Modify Subcategories and select New. And in this case, I mentioned that we were going to use line weights from 8 to 1. So this one is going to be the heaviest one because this is where we're kind of cutting through the earth. So I'm going to name this 8, and then I'm going to call it solid and then black. And so that's its name. I need to actually change its line weight to 8, and then it's black, and then it's solid. So I've created that one new line weight, or I'm sorry, line style. And so I can select that line, and then I can change it to an 8 solid black. You'll see it's much heavier now. And then I'll check that box, and you'll see we get this crosshatch pattern. Well, that's not exactly what we wanted, right? So what we need to do is we need to change that to a different filled region. So I'm going to select it, which tells me it's a filled region crosshatch, and I want to make a new filled region type. So I'll select Edit Type, and I'll select Duplicate, and we'll call this Solid White. And then I will grab a fill pattern that is solid, and then I'll make it sure that it's opaque because it could be transparent. So I want it to be opaque, and then I want to select the color white. So now it actually is solid and white. We'll click OK, and then it should cover up our site. So that's how you work with line styles. That's how you create a filled region as well. So if you look at, let me see how many views we have open here. Probably too many. So let me close a couple of these views. And then we'll do sort of a side-by-side view so we can kind of see, really how much depth there is in this elevation that we need to articulate. So here we are, and this is looking in the correct direction. This is actually a north elevation, so you can see here that's the north side, so we're really looking sort of back toward the building. So you can actually see there's quite a bit of depth, in elevation, from here all the way to the back. So we need to, express that in this elevation. So let's hop back into this elevation. And what we can see for sure is that this, this section here, let me see if I can kind of select it for you, is this face or this facade is the thing that's the closest to us in elevation. So arguably it should have the heaviest line around it. And then if you look even closer, you'll see that there's actually this canopy, which probably the edge of that canopy is really the closest thing that we have. So what I want to do, it looks like it's actually showing up here as pretty heavy, but I want to, just for the purposes of explanation, I want to show you how we can get all these line weights set up. So I'll go to, so we're still in Manage, so I want to go to Line Styles, and I want to set up some more line styles. So we've already created this 8 line style. I'm going to create a couple more. So because we're going to use these different line styles in order to basically express the depth of this elevation. So let me just check here real quick. So we have the 8 line style. Let's create a 1 line style. And then we'll create a 2. And what's nice about this naming convention is that it's really clear what you're getting when you when you have to choose what what line style you want to work with. Because of course we could make one that was hidden and green, and then we could change to hidden and green. So it makes it really nice and simple way to choose. So I'm just changing these so they actually are a line weight of 4 and 5 and so on. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 8. So those are some line styles for us to work with now that we've created on our own. And what's nice is that you can create all sorts of different line styles, and that can then become the basis for for the developing the aesthetic for your office or for your own work. So the thing that's the sort of the closest to the viewer here is this canopy. So what I want to do, and ultimately I want to show you 2 techniques for creating this depth. And this is the first one. And the first one is really using detail lines. So literally to start with a Revit model, so you have all these modeled elements, but essentially to draft over that model using lines of a certain thickness. So for example here, this is the thing that's the closest to the viewer, so I'm going to do a 5 line weight, and I'm going to use the rectangle tool. This is probably going to look pretty similar. We'll just do it for consistency. So that one should look pretty heavy. Now we know that this glass or this curtain wall facade here is the next closest thing. So what I want to do is I want to
Mark, I just have a question.
Sorry. Line tool again.
Could you you might want to restart your screen. So yeah, because it's a little hard to follow. I think there might be a little glitch going on. Something's happening. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure the attendees are able to see it. Okay.
Are the folks not seeing it?
It's a little bit jumpy, but yeah, let's give that another try. Sorry about that. Go for it.
So looking okay now? Okay. So what we were going to do is we were going to grab another line style. So we started with the 5, and now we're going to grab the 4 line style. And we're just going to really simply draw some lines over this elevation. So bear with me here as I just draw some lines. Over this elevation. And in some ways, you might think that this is like almost too simple of a technique. But the truth is that, a lot of times, well, the truth is that this gets the job done really quickly, but also it makes it really easy for someone to jump in and make any revisions that you might need to make as it relates to line weights later on. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. So I want to get these columns. I want to make sure that they show up because they're proud of everything as well. And then I'm going to just quickly copy these guys around, and making sure that I have the multiple little checkbox selected. Okay. So here you can see we're starting to develop a little bit of line weight here, a little bit of understanding of depth. Now we're doing that, as I mentioned, with detail lines. There's another really great way to manipulate these line weights, and that's using the line work tool, which is, for me, was a sort of a hidden tool that no one ever. It took me a while to finally find, and I think it's a pretty awesome tool. It very quickly allows you to override the line styles for a modeled element. So for example, let me just show you how it works. So when you select this guy, it's under Modify, by the way. Let's say, for example, let me back up here. If I select this this piece, you'll see that it's, it's sort of maybe another layer back. So maybe what we want to do, we want to make that a 3-line line weight. So we can use this line work tool and then go up to the 3, and we can just select that modeled element and it will make it a 3, which is really nice because if you have this, let's say you have this, I believe this is a wall. If you have this wall, if for example it moved in space, so let's say it started somewhere different and it got taller, what's nice about it is that you've affected that line and it stays the same. Now of course if you delete this wall or you make a new wall, that doesn't sort of, that doesn't apply. But as long as that wall stays the same, and maybe if it moves or something, you get a lot of value out of using this line work tool.
Okay, Mark, can I interrupt for a second? I'm going to stop the recording right now.
We have this wall, and I showed you how wonderful this thing is, but sometimes it doesn't work perfectly. For example, if I wanted to change that line, you'll see that it gives me this really clumsy, since that whole wall continues past there, for some reason it won't override and won't hide that line. So this would be one of those examples where unfortunately you kind of have to live with, well, maybe not unfortunately, but the line weight or the line work tool, might not be the best. I'll show you another instance where it works really well. So here I'm going to, one more time, draw around this this wall with a line weight of 3, so it's a little bit lighter than the 4. And so we have that lighter line weight. Now one thing that you might notice here is that, and I'm going to expand this so you can see a little bit more, is that we have all these doors and they have this swing in elevation. And we could probably open up the family and put those line weights on a visibility parameter, but one of the simplest things you can do is use the line work tool and use the invisible line style in order to make those lines literally just go away. And so what's nice is that they're still in that model, they're still in that family, but in this case they're just hidden. So let me just do that briefly for these guys. And so you can see how quickly they go away. So this is a really simple way to sort of solve that problem. Now, if you kind of back up a little bit and kind of think about what we have here, as I was showing earlier, we have this 3D model with, a lot of depth. And so what I want to do is I want to take this elevation here, the main facade here, and I want to essentially halftone it. So I'm going to select this wall, and I'm going to use an override graphic, or an override graphics in view. And so by selecting this, if I right-click on it and do override graphics in view, there are 3 different ways you can override the graphics of something in a particular view. You can do it by element, which means by choosing one thing. You can do it by category, which means it would change, all of the walls, or by filter. But in this case, I don't want to halftone every wall, so I just want to choose this element, and I want to choose halftone. And there's a bunch of other graphic overrides that I could choose, but in this case, all I want to do is override it and make it halftone. So we'll click OK, and you'll see that's nice and halftone. And now we have this monster facade here. So, one thing I'm going to do to make this a little simpler, this might be a little bit of a selection trick. I've done this in sort of preparing for this. I've selected this entire facade, and it takes quite a while to select it. But if I do visibility graphics, I just typed VG, and if I select everything and turn everything off, and all I leave on are curtain panels and curtain systems, I think I'm going to get just that facade. I need to leave walls on too. So if I turn on walls too, I think it's going to show that facade. There it is. So this should be a little bit of a lighter selection. I'll go back and turn everything back on in a moment. So I have everything selected. And then what I'll do is I'll do a filter so that will make sure that I've only selected all of these curtain panels. And then what I'm going to want to do is halftone them. We have them all selected. And this is the part that just takes a minute for it to kind of crunch through. Seeing a couple questions while this is coming along here. Fred is asking if the model is updated, will a line weight retain its thickness for reuse at a later time? If you're using the line work tool, so let me go back to this. So I want to make sure I've selected curtain panels and walls, but not curtain wall grids because we don't need those. So we'll just select that. It's going to take a minute to churn through that. Back to Fred's question, if the model is updated, will a line weight retain its thickness for reuse at a later time? Yeah, it will. Michael is asking, is there any way to have Revit automatically scale line weights on an elevation based on an object's relative depth in the model? That's a good question. Is there any way to have Revit automatically do it? And the answer is yes, but it doesn't work. It's called working with profiles. I'll show it to you a little bit later, or I'll show you where the tool is, and then I'll tell you not to waste your time with it. Because drawing a couple of lines over this, it gets you exactly what you want in really short order. Whereas fooling around with this profile tool that they have, that it's just not really well developed, just doesn't work very well. So we're going to look to right-click on this. And again, this is the part where it kind of takes a while. And we'll override these graphics in view. And we'll do it by element as well. And we'll just halftone it. So there's element. And then we'll select halftone. Okay, and then we'll click out. So just a moment, and then we'll make a couple more adjustments, and then I'll show you how you can work with shadows, and then we can take some questions. All right, so now you can see we have this thing grayscale. What I want to do is, I want to create a little, well, actually I need to turn visibility graphics back on, and then make sure everybody else is turned on. Again, because remember I hid everything just for the purposes of speeding up the selection. So we have our line weights here that we've been talking about. We've grayed out this guy. Looks like maybe that's a mask. So let me turn off that mask. I think I mistakenly turned that guy back on. He was probably hidden by default. So this is what we have. Now I want to use detail lines again. And I'm going to use the 2 line weight to show how you can manipulate this. Looks like I zoomed out too far. So we'll just quickly draw this around. Because, essentially by making everything halftone, it's making all these lines both thin, but then also essentially gray. So we want to have a little bit of line weight, a little bit of black, right? A little bit of black on these guys. And we can continue this so we make it all the way around. Okay. And then we'll move all the way to the end here. We do have a couple pieces here we should just put a little line weight on. I put the 2 there. Maybe we should, well, maybe that's fine. Maybe let's leave that 2 line weight, or that 2 line, and let's just continue it here. And then I'm typing DL, which is a quick command for detail lines. And then we can just draw around these guys, because these guys are also pretty far back in this elevation. So I think we just need one more line, which is this guy. And that'll pretty much get us where we want to go. So those are pretty much the line styles and the lines that we want to have. The final element that I wanted to just cover briefly was about shadows. So there's a shadow tool here at the bottom. If you select this, it will turn the shadows on. Pretty simply, right? So it's a really powerful tool that I don't see a lot of people use, but I think it tends to read really nicely in elevation. If you and you can adjust the density or the darkness, as it were, of the shadow. So if you go to, let's see, it's under sun path, so it's sun settings. Well, actually, what you can do under this that dialog box is essentially change the angle and the orientation of the sun. So, a lot of folks like to have a specific location, date, and time, and then it uses the actual, the real lighting. To be honest with you, I've actually, when you're creating elevations, I've had a lot of luck just using, this sunlight from top right or top left, because it really quickly gives you a nice shading. All you have to do is change the azimuth or the altitude. For example, if I wanted those at 45, then you'll see the angle there got a little bit sharper. And then if you want to change, as I was mentioning earlier, if you want to change the density, you can do that under graphic display options. So here you can actually, if you wanted really dark shadows, you could raise this to 90 and you could get basically black shadows. Or if you wanted to be under, 20 or 30, which is what I tend to prefer, you can look at something like that. And then a newer tool that they have here is to show ambient shadows, which when you check this on, it's sort of interesting. I haven't encountered it recently, so I'm not sure how new it is, but it creates this sort of gradient, which has kind of a classic look to it maybe. But for my taste, I'm gonna pass on this one. There is really kind of a control thing here, where I have kind of a being able to control how this looks. I don't have any control over these ambient shadows. So if I really wanted to look like this, I would probably print this as a PDF and bring it into Illustrator and create the gradient there with much more control. Whereas Revit's doing all the work here and giving me zero options to change it. So. But the shadows is really helpful. You don't have to create all those, by yourself, which is nice. So, with that, that pretty much takes us to the end of creating this. Just, for fun, I would finish this off by creating this, creating a sheet, and then dragging that view onto this this page, and since it's kind of coming with a standard viewport here, you're getting this kind of nasty looking title bar. So you could create your own title bar, just duplicate it and call it no title bar, and then you could have it set to no, and then this title bar here won't have anything in it. And so then you can get a much more elegant look at this. And then finally, Control P for print. I'll sort of skip most of this stuff, center it 100%. I want the colors grayscale. This is one trick here, is that it's going to print it. I want it to print with vector processing so that it gives me vector line work. But since it has those shadows, it's going to default to raster processing. And you'll see the difference here in a minute. So when you go through this, I'm going to cancel and just click OK, and this is going to generate this type of a view. And you'll see the difference here. So this is not vector line work, so it is pixely at some point, whereas this guy here, the original, actually was, since there's no shadows here, it was able to print as a vector. So this line work doesn't have any pixelation. But nevertheless, I mean, it still prints at a really high quality, high resolution that I think results in a much more beautiful drawing. So, so that brings me to the end of what the content that I wanted to cover. And so from here, Kevin, how should we approach questions?
All right.
If folks have questions,
okay, I have some questions coming in. Let's see. Bruno has one. When outputting an elevation with shadows, Revit will rasterize the entire view, right? Is there a way to output the view with vectors? I don't know if you covered this already.
Right. So it's a good question. The only way around it. So the answer is no. There's not a way to output the view with vectors. The way around it, though, is that you could essentially you could print it as a vector image without the shadows. So you could turn the shadows off and print it as a vector image, and then turn the shadows on and print that as a raster, and then overlay them in Illustrator, and you'll get what you want that way.
Let's see. Okay.
Sure.
Mark, do you want to take this one from Reza, or I don't think we missed anything, did we? But I mean, if you guys have any questions, please let us know. I think this is a good time. We have to make up for some lost time, so it's all good. Shoot them.
Yeah. So the topics, are, like I mentioned at the beginning, line weights and object styles and so on. Michael's question, just back to Michael's question, or maybe even, so I kind of answered Michael's question about have Revit automatically scale line weights based on an object's relative depth. I guess I didn't cover that one. It's this crazy tool here called, let me show you, called Profile or Silhouettes. And admittedly, I think I used Silhouettes maybe 5 years ago, and it was such a mess. I've never gone back. And the idea was that this would somehow, take whatever's at the edge of this drawing, and it would give it this line weight. But it's just really clumsy and it doesn't really work very well. So what I've found is that doing this is so much faster, and you can have so much control, so much better control over this. The downside, though, is that, as you might be suggesting by asking about you were suggesting, can it automatically do it? And so, assuming you're thinking that way, what you're thinking is, okay, as my model changes, boy, it sure would be nice to have a tool that, automatically adjusts all these line weights, or, moves all these lines around so that I don't have to update it again. And to be honest with you, there's no simple way to do that. I think this profiles or the silhouettes thing was sort of, supposed to be, the automatic way to do it, but I'm sure I can hear all my architecture professors, wagging their fingers at me, suggesting that, it would be a good idea for this stuff to be automatic, and that instead, you really need to take the time to go in there and do it. But I know how fast we all have to, move in an office, and how sure it would be nice to have that stuff automated. So it's kind of a long answer to your question, though. So Keith is asking for tips on setting standards. Well, so tips for setting standards. Well, I mean, of course, the most obvious one is just to set some standards. You need to set standards for the object styles as well as the line weights and the line style. So those are really kind of the three main things. All I can say, I guess the only opinion I have is to really kind of keep it simple. It seems like there's so many different possibilities that, the simplest thing I've ever come up with was, in object styles, you sort of by default, you give everything the same line weight and projection, for example, like 1 or 2 or 3 or something like that, and then everything the same thing in cut, 4 or 5 or 6 or something. And then from there, then you have sort of a simple basis, and then from there, people can make adjustments. The other thing is you just got to be careful. Sometimes, you want to make sure that your lowest line weight is the lowest that you can make it. So, you want to give yourself a little space. So, making by default, making all of your projection line weights 1 means that you don't have anything, you can't go any lower. So maybe it makes more sense to make the default projection line weight 2, so that then someone could make it lighter, so there's still some space below the standard. So I guess those are sort of the basics, and then like I showed you when you're working on creating these line styles. I mean, the names kind of create themselves, and I've seen 10 ways of doing it, but you just kind of want to get the line weight, the line color, and the line pattern in there, and then everyone will have their sort of subtle preferences. Any other questions about setting standards? I mean, I think that's a good question.
Keith? Keith, let us know when you do have one. Let's go back to the beginning, because I know before the recording we had a question from Peter. It was about, I guess this is a good one to answer for the recording for YouTube and Vimeo. So Peter had a question. Our company just purchased Revit. We are a lighting design firm and needed to interface with current architecture standards. How much interoperability is there between AutoCAD and Revit?
Right. Well, so as it relates to creating, moving two-dimensional information between Revit and CAD, it works pretty well. You can export, pretty much whatever you need, any sort of two-dimensional drawings out of Revit into a CAD format pretty effectively. Every year it gets a little bit better. And then you can import, any sort of two-dimensional CAD information in to your Revit model using a link. And so that can be easily detached so it doesn't bog down your model, and so on. So I mean, both of those things work pretty well as it relates to 2D information. Peter, I think later you asked then about, can you bring in 2D? I'm sorry, can you bring in 3D items easily from a 3D CAD model into Revit? And to the best of my knowledge, that does not work very well. Although I must admit, I have never actually tried to do that. I just know that from all the war stories you hear, moving three-dimensional data, from Revit into some sort of more sort of open standard, or moving it from some other 3D program, like let's say SketchUp, into Revit, doesn't work very well. And I think that's just because it's a much more complicated problem to solve. In fact, what's sort of interesting is that, I quickly mentioned that, every year, getting CAD two-dimensional data in and out of Revit gets a little bit better, which suggests that it still doesn't work perfectly. So doing it with 3D is much more sort of, you have to be much more careful, and you should, got to work out that workflow before you invest a lot of time in developing stuff in CAD. Because for the most part, if you bring in 3D information into Revit, it's pretty much dead geometry. So unless you're applying some sort of Revit geometry to it, it's really not that useful. So that's...
Okay, and then I think we have one last one. This was answered beforehand too, but I think it's a good one that we should share. Let's see, this is from Fred. Fred had a question about, it was 3D parametric models, and then
yes.
How easy is it? Yeah.
Yeah, so Fred asked, how easy is it to build 3D parametric family components? And my answer is that it's it's a hard one to answer, because I mean, I guess, so I know how to do it, and I've been doing it for 5 years or something like that, and so I would say that now it's relatively easy for me to do it. It's not a beginner's topic, as it were, I guess. So it's something that is really powerful, and actually I always advocate that folks learn how to build parametric family components, because you can get a lot of value out of your Revit, a lot more value out of your Revit model if you know how to use those tools properly. And so, as a little plug, I mean, for example, we have at Black Spectacles, we probably have 4 or 5 courses on developing parametric family components, which altogether is maybe somewhere between 5 and 8 hours of content. So, so I guess in theory, somewhere between 5 and 8 hours of learning, and you can learn how to, how to build a parametric family component. So I guess that's how I would answer that is, it's certainly not rocket science, but it's not really intuitive. You really kind of have to be taught it because it is a very, very particular environment to work in. But once you know it, it's really powerful, and you'll use it all the time.
Cool. I think that pretty much ends the Q&A session. For any questions that we might have left, I'll forward them to Mark, and then we'll share it on our blog, and then we'll also share that on social media as well. So, Mark, if you will, I will take over the speaking responsibilities.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time.
Cool. Let's do this. All right, let me know if it switches over. All right, give me a second here. Okay. What? Let's do this again. Yeah. All right. Now that we're back, can you guys see my screen here? Awesome. Good to go. But yeah, I mean, we've had some difficulties, but they're minor. Mark took care of them. We answered as much of your questions today, and I think this presentation has been overall pretty awesome. So I want to thank the attendees for joining us into today's presentation. Thanks for hanging on. I do want to remind everybody that we do have a coupon for 10% off at Black Spectacles. So, I mean, they have three types of memberships and then 10% off. I think you're going to get a lot of value. They don't just cover Revit. They also cover Rhino, Grasshopper, 3ds Max as well. So I encourage you guys to check it out. But yeah, if you guys are looking to pick up a version of Revit Architecture 2014, the digital version is available from us at Novedge. And to make it quick, if you guys want more questions, more details, if you want somebody to answer your Autodesk questions, you can feel free to contact our specialist, Autodesk specialist, Scott at novedge.com. And another plug for Black Spectacles, as you can tell, Mark is very knowledgeable. He is in architecture and also a trainer as well. So if you guys want more information, do check it out. And there is a free T-shirt, which I will offer a link in our post-webinar follow-up email. So Mark, do you have anything quick to say before we transition to the next slide? Or
That's it. Again, it's been a pleasure. If you have any questions, just find us on Black Spectacles.
Yeah, so if you guys have any questions at all, yeah, definitely contact Mark at blackspectacles.com, and you can also forward your questions to me, and then we'll try to meet halfway. Moving on. Yeah, so if you guys want to find the questions, it's blog@novedge.com, and then if you want to follow us, any webinar updates, industry-related news, facebook.com/Novedge is a perfect place to head on to check it out. In our next upcoming webinar, we have Tamsin Slater from UK, who will be on hand to present and talk about site design with Vectorworks Landmark. If you guys want more information, I encourage you guys to check out this free webinar at novedge.com/webinar/83. And if you have any questions, comments, and feedback about today's webinar and future webinars and how we can improve, I encourage you guys to contact me at kevin@novedge.com. And definitely, I'll be working hard today to try to upload it, make sure all the minor stuff is taken care of. So the webinar will be uploaded on vimeo.com/Novedge and also at youtube.com/Novedge as well. And thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being patient. Feel free to check out our social media channels at facebook.com, Google+, we're also on Google+, and you can follow us and tweet us live at Novedge. So join the conversation there. On behalf of the Novedge team and Mark, I want to thank you guys for joining us. Have a good one. Take care.